Can copyright Caterpillar cakes clearly create customer confusion? UK grocers Marks and Spencer and Aldi have been trading barbs over this recently. But if you take a look at their competing cakes, Cuthbert the Caterpillar and Colin the Caterpillar, well, let's just say that even the great Marie Antoinette would be perplexed. We're here today with special guest Nika Videtic, and this is stuff you should know about IP. Stuff you should know about IP is the sweetest, chocolatiest, most light and fluffy, melt in your mouth podcast on intellectual property. So if you're having fun learning about IP, please hit that like button wherever you're watching or listening and leave a comment, subscribe, and don't forget to bring home a slice for your spouse. Today's episode of Stuff You Should Know About IP is brought to you by the Trademark Lawyer magazine. If you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on in the world of IP and trademarks, go to www.trademarklawyermagazine.com. Each issue is free to read for up to 8 weeks. That's trademarklawyermagazine.com for global news in the world of trademarks. Okay, Tom, Nika, let's talk about cake. And I hope you guys appreciated my Marie Antoinette reference. I tried so hard to put that into the intro.
Ray, you've been trying to put that into the intro for like 12 weeks now. Well, see, finally, you had an opportunity to put a Marie Antoinette reference in.
What Nika doesn't know is I'm a huge Marie Antoinette fan. I mean, I've got pictures of famous paintings of her on my bedroom wall.
Of course you do. Who doesn't? No, Ray,
I know like two things about Marie Antoinette, and one is that she said, "Let them eat cake."
Listen, that was clever, that intro, and brilliant, and it had nothing to do with Marie Antoinette. That was a great intro.
The best don't know if she actually said that, by the way. That might be one of those rumors that's not true.
No, that was a great intro. So anyway, so we have a situation which Nika is going to give us all kinds of great information about, because she is, as I've just figured out, a law student, which means she's going to be out there in the big bad world of lawyers one of these days. So Marks and Spencer has had this Caterpillar cake called Colin for like 30 years. It's been unchanged since like 2004. And Aldi's came out with Cuthbert the Caterpillar recently. And about 2 months before they were sued by Marks and Spencer, they pulled it off the market. But then they brought it back for like this big charity thing. And that's really ticking off Marks and Spencer. But there's one other piece of information that we need before we can start our discussion, and that is these are not the only Caterpillar cakes on the market. There is Colin, there is Cuthbert, but there's also Cecil, which is Waitros's Caterpillar cake. There's Wiggles, which is Sainsbury's Caterpillar cake. There's Curly, which is Tesco's Caterpillar cake. And there's Clyde, which is Asda's Caterpillar cake. And Ray and Nika, let me tell you, they all look very much alike. Now, they don't look as close as Colin and Cuthbert, but if you look at all these Caterpillar cakes next to each other, you're like, that's a lot of Caterpillar cakes. And they all pretty much look like Caterpillar cakes. So, Nika, what's going on here? Can they do this, Nika? You're like in your second year of graduate school for law, which means you're the most expert on this entire podcast. So the question is, Nika, can they do this? Can all these do this?
So this has been a very high profile case since last year, 2021, April. And yes, essentially it involves the trademark infringement dispute between Marks and Spencer and Aldi, where Aldi's look-alike design cake, Cuthbert, the Caterpillar, was accused of infringing Marks and Spencer Colin the Caterpillar cake and causing consumer confusion in the cake product marketplace. Now, the confidentiality agreement that's been agreed between both parties meant that the settlement between the two remained private, and any kind of future changes maybe that are reflected in the cake's design we can then infer maybe that those are the agreement that was the agreement that was decided on. But we don't know for sure whether Aldi was actually wrongly, whether Aldi was, that it was affirmed that Aldi wrongly alleged,
Infringed.
No,
sorry.
that's okay,
Yeah.
Nika. I think what you mean is we don't really know if Aldi was actually infringing
There we go. Yes.
Colin the Caterpillar because
Yes.
it's not public, right? There was
Yes.
no final adjudication, but instead they settled. Is that what I'm hearing, Nika? They settled.
Exactly. They settled.
Brilliant.
We
Perfect.
don't know the details. It's all kept secret.
Right, but I love the way you put that. We might know the details by what happens next.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So if Aldi's comes out with their they have, you call it Cuthbert.
Cuthbert. Yeah.
Cuthbert.
Cuthbert. Yeah.
So you don't pronounce the th, you pronounce it t. So it's Cuthbert.
Yeah, I think that's how it goes.
No, that's okay. You know better than I because you're actually over there. So if Aldi comes out with a new version of Cuthbert that doesn't look quite as exactly like Colin, as I'm sure, Ray, you're going to be able to put the two side by side on the screen during this podcast.
Yeah, I'll share it right now.
Okay, good. It's stunning how close these two cakes are. It's almost as if, to me, Aldi went out, bought the Cuthbert cake and copied it exactly, and then went into the marketplace and said, bought the Colin cake, copied it exactly, and then changed the name to Cuthbert. They didn't even change the first letter, right? So what do you think, though, Nika? You're our brilliant law student. There was a settlement, so that might give you the hint that there was some sense that Aldi had that they might lose, right? Because they settled. Yeah,
I think it's easier to look at it from the perspective of both parties. So in terms of Marks and Spencer, if you look at, for instance, Cuthbert the Caterpillar and Colin the Caterpillar, you can instantly see Colin and Cuthbert are very different names. But so the court may put a little bit more of an emphasis on that and say, well, there's a difference, so there would be no risk for consumer confusion on that. But then there's also the element of an average consumer. The fact that there's already a lot of different Caterpillar cakes in the market may mean that consumers are already accustomed to seeing a lot of these different types of cakes and may not find this they may not think that this is that strange or bizarre, so they may actually not confuse Colin the Caterpillar cake with Cuthbert, that it's associated with Marks and Spencer. So I think the more you digest the different elements of the case, the more different considerations that pop up in thinking about it and analyzing the case.
Because it's all about consumer confusion, right, Nika?
Yes.
I mean, the question is, will people going in to buy Cuthbert the Caterpillar think they're buying something from Marks and Spencer? Right? That's the big question, is will there be confusion as to source, right?
Yeah. If you look at it from, I think it's like this: if you're not aware that Colin the Caterpillar is actually originating from Marks and Spencer, if you have no idea who Colin the Caterpillar is, it's much more readily confused with Cuthbert the Caterpillar. But if you're a regular, for instance, customer of Marks and Spencer, then if you regularly pass it by and you see, oh, hey, there's Colin the Caterpillar in stalls, you may you become much more readily aware of the differences, I think, if you're a regular consumer and customer and aware of the different types of products that are already in the market in terms of the Caterpillar cake. So I think that's the perspective that that Aldi may be coming from. Why is our product that different if you already have different types of Caterpillar products from different chains in the UK store?
Yeah, and by the way, it's kind of an interesting analysis because it's the opposite of what you'd normally think. Right. And that is, we're not looking at a comparison of the trademarks. We're looking at a comparison of the caterpillars, right? It's almost like we're not looking at the marks, we're looking at the product. Because right now, again, there's a Curly, a Clyde, a Cecil, a Wiggles, a Colin, and a Cuthbert. So, and Caterpillar, that wouldn't be considered in because it's generic, right? It's descriptive of the caterpillar. So people would just be looking at the names. and maybe the names are all different. So in this case, if it were just Colin the Caterpillar, Cuthbert the Caterpillar, Cecil Wiggles, Curly and Clyde, and the cakes all look different, we probably wouldn't even be having this discussion because there's so many in the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
But the cakes, these two cakes look exactly the same. And somebody might come into the marketplace and say, wow, it looks like M&S has come out with a brother to Colin the Caterpillar, you know, and it's an M&S product because of what we in the US would call trade dress.
Right.
So there's the words and the graphics, but then there's the trade dress, which is like, for example, there was a case in the US years ago where two taco restaurants or Mexican restaurants had almost identical themes. And one sued the other, the one who created the theme, for trade dress infringement. And they prevailed. They actually were able to stop the other restaurant from using their theme. So the names of the firms or the restaurants were different, mostly different, but the theme, the look and feel of the restaurant itself was the same. And if I were arguing on behalf of M&S, I would say, yeah, they have Cuthbert and we have Colin, which are arguably different, but the themes to our cakes are identical. They've copied it identically. You know, so what do you think about that, Nika?
Yeah, so in the UK here, the main action that was actually being discussed in terms of, because Marks and Spencer does have registered trademarks to Colin the Caterpillar and also the female version, Connie the Caterpillar, and also the packaging also, of the product. But they were discussing there was some potential discussion around unregistered rights in terms of passing off. The UK common law action, which generally aims to prevent the use of visually similar branding, the getup, the look and feel of a product. And that was pretty much framing the discussion of, can they associate the goodwill that's associated to the product in terms of the consumers? Can it be misrepresented? And can consumers visually think, oh, Colin the Caterpillar and Cuthbert, they're confusing the two. And is it causing damage to, or is it likely to cause damage to Marks and Spencer's by diverting the sales away from Marks and Spencer to Aldi, for instance? So that was one of the discussions that was being framed. But the issue with passing off as a claim on its own is that the main limitation is actually requires a lot of evidence to prove a business created substantial goodwill with its consumers in the marketplace. And that's not always very easy to achieve.
But don't you think it's easy to achieve here though, Nika, that Colin the Caterpillar is the OG, right? I mean, of all the Caterpillar cakes, Colin is the original. And they've been around for 30 years, substantially unchanged for 30 years. So they probably have established recognition as the thing we see on the screen as their trade dress, if you will.
I was just going to say, for anyone who's listening and not watching the podcast, we have a photo up of the two cakes, and you can see in the Colin the Caterpillar and the Cuthbert the Caterpillar trademarks themselves, they're pretty different. And of course, it's a different name. And like Tom said, Caterpillar just is descriptive. But if you look at the cakes themselves, you know, they're like a tubular shaped cake covered in chocolate, and like the face is made with white chocolate, and the legs are these like little white chocolate, almost like like little chocolates like you get out of a box. And they have on the backs, they look like M&Ms or like candy coated chocolates like an M&M, and they were like purple and yellow and orange, and all together it looks like the exact same cake. So if you're just listening, it's worth going and looking at the photos of them side by side. We don't see the packaging for Colin.
Yes, exactly, Ray. That's one thing. It would be nice to see the side by side packaging as well.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it. But yeah, so
well, here's a funny thing. So here's a funny thing about the story that I think is clever in the way that they're both approaching this. So Aldi's is saying, hey, we're bringing this back on a limited basis for charity, right? So it's difficult to fight back against that, right? Because it's for charity. So they say, so M&S, there was a tweet by Aldi, and it said, "Hey, Marks and Spencer, we're taking a stand against Caterpillar cruelty. Can Colin and Cuthbert be besties?" And then they say, "We're bringing back a limited edition of Cuthbert next month and want to donate all profits to cancer charities, including your partners, Macmillan Cancer," which Colin the Caterpillar has been supporting for like 25 years. And then also their partner, which is Teenage Cancer Trust. And then they use a hashtag, Caterpillars for Cancer. So then M&S tweets back saying, "Hey, Aldi, we love the charity idea. Colin's been a big fundraiser for years. We just want you to use your own character." And then they say, "How about Kevin the Carrot Cake? The idea's on us, and we promise we won't do Keith." So it's really clever how Aldi's is trying to, get public support on their side by saying, "Hey, it's for charity. Come on, dude. It's for charity. We're trying to help people here." But M&S responded, I think, brilliantly, which is, "Yes, and we've been about charity forever. Why don't you use your own character for charity?" And then they suggest one, which is really cute, right? And then they say, "We promise we won't do Keith. So we'll give you Kevin the Carrot Cake. We promise we won't do Keith." I think it's really brilliant how M&S has responded to what could have been a very awkward situation where they're being cast like anti-charity, What do you think, Nika?
Yeah, right. It's one of those interesting social media strategies that was used first by Aldi and then reciprocated by Marks and Spencer. But the kind of tactic that Aldi used, I think they try to turn a situation into something a little bit more lighthearted and divert some of the accusations away from them and get better publicity on their side. And that's really on throwing that on social media is one of the best ways to get people on your side. So especially in this day and age. So that was an interesting tactic. And I think also there has been some commentary surrounding that Aldi's use of that has actually helped to kind of dilute the confusion a little bit between the two, that it made consumers aware, oh, okay, you're talking about Cuthbert the Caterpillar, and this is Marks and Spencer's product, so it's very different. So I think that also they were very smart in thinking what kind of implications this could have for them.
Some of the social media posts were really funny. This was one where I think Aldi posted this one, and it shows Cuthbert in, it shows them side by side, but Cuthbert's in his box, but they put like bars over the box, so it looks like Cuthbert's in jail. And then after the settlement came through, I saw a post that they had that said, Cuthbert's been released early on good behavior. But you can see in, so here you can see the packaging for Colin. And you can see the packaging. I mean, the bars are not real, but you can see the way the trademark is used on the packaging and versus how it is here on Colin. And they're clearly very different. But one other really interesting photo. So here are all those other cakes that you were describing before, Tom.
Yeah.
I don't know it doesn't say the names of the caterpillars, but it says which company.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, Tesco's is called Curly. That's the one at the bottom with the orange.
There's Curly.
Sainsbury's is Wiggles. Asta's is Clyde.
That one's not even on here.
It's on the bottom left.
Asta. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. And then there's one by Waitrose.
Mm-hmm.
Is that on? Oh yeah, that one is Cecil. And then you have the M&S's Colin. And then you have the Aldi. Oh, by the way, this Aldi looks different in the face because it doesn't have the chocolate
eyes
or the dark chocolate eyes.
Yeah.
But what I love, Ray, what you just described, which is the way they said he was released early. First, they have him in prison. Here's the thing that's really great about it for both companies. I want to buy one of these cakes now, right?
Yeah.
I want to go out and I'll probably buy one of each. because
Right.
I'll bet you this dispute is building the recognition of the Caterpillar cake for all of these companies, right?
Yeah.
And the lighthearted way, like you said, Nika, the lighthearted way that Aldi responded, because here's the thing, when you're an infringer, you don't want to be cast as the villain, right? I mean, I've been involved in patent and trademark litigations where there's just blatant copying and then they're denying it and they're just villains, right? But Aldi's being so lighthearted, it's hard to not laugh at their approach, right? Because it's funny, it's cute. So they're not villains. But then M&S, instead of getting all indigent about it or indignant about it, I mean, instead of getting all indignant, they're being funny along with it, right? But they're just saying, hey, you know, we still want you to do your own thing. I don't know. I think they've handled this. Both sides have handled this very well. This is like a lesson on how to manage the social media in connection with infringement, which is very serious business, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And one other thing too that I was just thinking about this is
Is that your dog's barking?
Apologies, audience, to the barking dog. One of the things I was thinking about is so Aldi's is like a cut cost company, right? It's a more affordable products that are similar to other products that you can get in other supermarkets, grocery stores.
Right.
The difference in price between the M&S and the Aldi cakes was like 10 pounds. It was like 10 pounds less expensive for the Aldi cake. And
wait, how much is this cake?
I think M&S was like 23 pounds or something.
The other was only 13?
Yeah, something like that.
See, that's a big difference, right?
The exact figures, but that's a pretty big difference for a cake that, I mean, of course, all these cakes look somewhat similar, but the M&S and Aldi ones are the most similar. And, you know, if you're having a birthday party for your kid, you might think, well, I could go get Colin for 23, or I could go, and I've got 20 kids coming, so I'm going to need 5 of them. Or I could, you know, go to Aldi and spend half the cost. I mean,
right, but that actually goes against trademark infringement in my view, because it's showing that they're actually a kind of a different market. You know, now
right.
Let's say though that somehow these cakes that M&S had a patent on their cake. Okay, so let's say that somehow in this magical world that I'm creating right now, or M&S has a patent on their Caterpillar cake. Now, what you just described would not only be that would be a big reason to help them get a preliminary injunction granted against Aldi, because they're eroding their price, they're eroding their market, they're creating irreparable harm in the marketplace because it's diminishing the 23-pound cake down to a 13-pound cake. If it was a patent issue. So if it were a patent issue, their reduced price would actually work against Aldi in terms of defending their preliminary injunction motion. But because it's a trademark and trade dress issue, that could actually help them. You know, we're clearly a different, everybody knows you can't get an M&S for 13 pounds.
Right.
So everybody knows if you're getting it for 13 pounds, it must be the Aldi, right?
Yeah.
Kind of interesting the way that flips for trademark and patent.
The other thing too is, you know, obviously, well, maybe this isn't obvious, but I would assume that you can only get Colin at M&S and you can only get Cuthbert at Aldi. So you actually have to go to a totally different store, possibly in a totally different part of town, to get the cake that you want. And you have to
they're not side by side.
Yeah,
they're not side by side on store shelves.
Right. If they were side by side, it might be a bit different.
Yeah, so you have a difference in trademark, right? One is Cuthbert, one is Colin. Number two, you have a difference in price, a substantial difference in price, like 40% less. Number three, you can't even buy them in the same place, right? You can't get the Colin at Aldi's and you can't get the Cuthbert at M&S. So it's really going against the idea that consumers would be confused, which goes back to Nika's original comment about the settlement when I said, well, it shows that they probably felt there was something wrong. And Nika said, no, that's not maybe actually how it's going to play out. because maybe the settlement was more like M&S realized they have just as, they might lose. So let's just come up with a settlement, just change it a little bit or something like that. But you make some good points, Ray, about the differences in terms of consumer confusion, because ultimately, unlike patents, where consumer confusion is really not relevant, trademarks, it's all about likelihood of confusion to the consumers. So Colin versus Cuthbert, maybe it could be confusing, but you're given a lot of reasons why it's not, Ray and Nika. So what's the ultimate verdict, Nika? If you were the judge, you've heard all the facts now, you know the law because you're a law student. What's your verdict? What's your judgment, Nika? Guilty of trademark infringement or not guilty?
I would say guilty.
Guilty I love it. After all that, it's guilty. Okay, Ray, what's your reasoning, Nika?
No, but I think generally it's interesting because the case came pretty close to ask a question of how close can competitors actually get to the actual getup of designing the actual getup and visual appearance of a product without actually infringing on the product itself, because there's not enough evidence that could be established to say that consumers are legitimately confused in the marketplace. So I think that's an element that really kind of work against Marks and Spencer. But I would say, yeah, guilty, because Marks and Spencer has a very long line. It has been around since 1990, and it's been the first in the marketplace to establish its reputation with the Caterpillar cake. And I think if you compare the differences if you see the different types of cakes from different stores, this one I think is visually this strikingly similar. So
okay,
yeah.
what about this though, Nika?
Works now. Okay, we're back. We had a slight technical delay, but we're back.
So what I was going to ask Nika, who just banged down her gavel and said guilty as charged. I was going to ask Nika, in the US, we have something called estoppel, which basically means in a high level, if you've been letting it go for a long time, too late, you can't bring it up now. And I'm looking at M&S, they've been around. Yes, they've been around for like 30 years, but one day, Cecil steps in and they're like, whatever. Then Wiggles jumps into the scene and they're like, I'm just not going to do anything. Then you got Curly comes strolling in. Then you got Clyde coming in. And every time M&S does nothing. So now Aldi's comes along with Cuthbert and they're like, hey, everyone else is doing it. Everyone else is creating virtually the exact same Caterpillar cake. Why can't I? So they walk in and boom, they get punched right in the face by M&S. What do you say about that, Judge Nika?
Yeah, no, it definitely works against them, because if you pick up something doesn't sit right, or there's something disrupting your own brand line, you should act on it immediately rather than waiting it out, because it'll work against you, especially if you've built already a really pretty strong reputation around your brand. It's just better to go and consider your strategies straight from the start.
I like that. So Nika, I think M&S, Marks and Spencer should hire you as their intellectual property lawyer, because you would have said the very first sign of another competitive Caterpillar cake, let's take them down, right?
Yeah.
So Ray, what's your verdict? Your judgment?
My judgment is, I think that we need more data. I think the only way that we can really...
Oh, you don't get more data, Ray. That's it. You got to make your decision based on this.
Well, hold on. This isn't a real court of law. This is the monarchy, the Guarneri monarchy of
Good point. Good
law.
point.
And I say we buy one of each of these cakes. I say all 8 of them, and we do a taste test. And whichever one tastes the best, they're allowed to sell.
I agree. And by the way, I think we should eat the entire cakes. right?
Now it's turning into like one of those social media challenges. Like
That's right.
finish the whole cake,
That's right.
and get enough
Yeah,
views and
oh, actually, what we should do is have a contest between Aldi's and M&S. Each has to eat the other's cake,
ooh,
right?
there you go.
We'll
Yeah.
sit them down side by side. You got to eat the full cake with one fork. Can't use your fingers. Can't dig in and start cramming it in your mouth. You got to use the fork, pinky up, and then you've got to see who gets the cake eaten first. They win. How's that for Guarneri Land?
I'm all for it. I'm all
As
for
long
it.
as you're one of the judges,
It'll be a cheat day of all cheat days.
right? Well,
Um,
this was a Nika. I'm so
yeah.
glad we did this little session together. This is fun.
Yeah,
Same
thanks
here. Thank you
for
having
joining
me.
us, Nika. And so to all of you out there in podcast land, if you enjoyed listening to us talk about the M&S and Aldi Battle of the Caterpillar Cakes, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like, share your comments, let us know which Caterpillar cake you enjoy the most, and we'll see you next time.
So long.